Well, I am Jason Mears. I am the Director of Business Development with Florida Best Quote Insurance, and I am very pleased to have my friend and business partner, Rock Solid Inspection, and Vito, who is a master inspector with them. And he has been gracious enough to join us today to talk about some of the changes that have happened on the 4-point inspection form and how they will impact buyers and realtors from the inspector's perspective, because they're the ones that are having to do the changes or having to acknowledge the changes and fill those forms out differently. So I will let him run with it, and kind of, I know he's got a little presentation he wants to make. So thank you, Vito, for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Vito Bianca, lead trainer, educator, master inspector, troubleshooter, consultant with Rock Solid Home Inspections. And today we're tackling the shifting world of 4-point inspections. We're not just going to look at what's changed on paper, but what's changed in practice, what it means for our agent partners, even lenders trying to close deals in what's constantly an evolving insurance environment. My goal today is to give you clarity, not just about the form, but how to approach it strategically to reduce surprises, protect your clients, and protect your closings. And a lot of this is going to be my observations from over 30,000 inspections in the Tampa Bay area. So I've gotten to see some patterns and how that's affecting how these changes now are affecting a lot of our agent partners. And from what I'm hearing, we'll get into it. So it'll be what we observed, why that matters to you, and ideally what you can do about it to win. So let's start with the shift itself. The 4-point form itself has been updated, yes, but that's only part of the story. It's not just longer, they're not just requiring more information, it's being used, um, maybe not differently, but certainly with a lot more scrutiny. And by that I mean there was a time when, it's cyclical, right? There was a time when it felt like insurance carriers wanted to bind policies, and now they're looking to shed risk at every turn. That changes the nature of what happens once the inspection is done. The inspectors are required now to report more specific material types. For instance, cloth jacketed wiring, cast iron piping, multi-strand aluminum, the manufacture date on PEX, and those are all new additions. But here's the twist. Sometimes these things aren't necessarily defects. Still, just their presence is getting policies rejected in a lot of cases, not because something's broken, but because the age or the presence of certain materials. Even when we mark systems as satisfactory, it's no longer a guarantee that the policy will go through. And carriers aren't just reviewing up front either. They're issuing policies, then sending out their own inspectors weeks after closing, looking for reasons to cancel. Now, we'll get into the implications and how that affects the dynamic of the agent with boots on the ground. But some key takeaways here is that what I'm seeing anyway out in the field is the strategies that worked before negotiating the 4-point, using it to get the deal closed, cleaning it up post-inspection, not reading the reports, not taking the time to communicate early with the inspector or your insurance partner, assuming silence means acceptance. Those approaches are no longer holding up anymore. So the question isn't just what's changed, it's are you ready for how this game is being played now? So let's talk about a little bit about where the disconnect's beginning. we see what most of us have been taught, or at least how the process has traditionally worked, right? Um, you get under contract, you have the inspection come out, the inspector does a home inspection and fills out a 4 point while he's going. Any flagged issues get negotiated and fixed. A clean updated version gets submitted to the insurance agent. The policy gets bound and everybody moves on. But it's a little more, there's some more pitfalls now. Let me say that. Today, inspectors are required to document a little bit more detail and even when everything looks like it's working. Agents aren't always catching that new risk. Things like the age of pets, the presence of cloth jacketed wiring, cast iron plumbing, um, and there's a few others. They're not showing up always at defects, but they still get policies denied. So if our agent partners aren't communicating or working with an inspector who knows how to alert them and can articulate the difference, what's happening is these problems are becoming problems after the inspection period's over. Then the client's surprised, the agent looks bad, the seller raises an eyebrow, and now everybody kind of feels a little bit let down, and deals are falling apart. So why does this happen? Let's kind of quickly touch on that. It the form itself is about risk. Agents have been taught that if it's not on the 4 point, it's not worth negotiating. That there's almost like a built-in misunderstanding of what that form's for. Pardon me. I teach this stuff. I'm a CE course provider for home inspectors and real estate agents. And I can tell you that whenever I ask the question, okay, tell me what, in your opinion, is the 4 point? What is the 4 point inspection? I get a varied, varied response. And that's across home inspectors and real estate agents from, oh, it's a home inspection. It's an evaluation of the four key points of a home to it's a negotiation tool to it's from home inspectors. It is just as thorough as a home inspection, and all of those would be wrong, unfortunately. What it is, it's simply a form that carriers use to determine risk. When we start using it, and I know it sounds a little preachy, but again, 30,000 inspections, I kind of have an idea of where this is all breaking down. I actually had to author a course and get it approved for CEs just so I could start legitimately offering solutions to the community. So let's say we'll get into that, but let's say the 4 point inspection is done. The inspector marks materials that might fall under that category of being red flagged, and and yet we really have no way of knowing because again, if you look at the form, and I know Jason showed that in an earlier meeting, it's mainly just a checklist. If something's defective, we'll note it. If something's a hazard, we'll note it. If it's a specific condition that the form's asking for, we'll note it. But for some of these, it's just materials. They might be older, but in still good conditions. Now, there's tons of carriers that operate in Florida. They all have kind of different guidelines. So we can't, as inspectors, speculate what's going to be acceptable across the board or not. We can just mark what we saw. If you're the agent and you're in the field and you're looking at that, you're trained to look for here's the defects on the 4 point. This is what I'll negotiate so we can get to closing. And again, you get it done, you submit the policy, it's after the inspection period and they're coming back and they're saying, well, they're not accepting, they're not accepting multi-strand, or it's going to cost $5,000 more a year, or whatever it is. It's problems when you don't need them. So And the carriers themselves, they're not really just reviewing and deciding up front. Maybe they bind the policy and then send their own inspector out weeks later. And I know some of them who work for the insurance carriers. The inspector gets the policy canceled based on the same conditions that were on the 4 point when it was initially approved. So here's the reality. Satisfactory doesn't always mean insurable anymore. And that gap, that blind spot, is where deals are falling. So I call this the agent's dilemma, and we've kind of touched on this. The way everybody's been trained or just learned through experience is to treat the 4 point as part of the negotiation look toolkit. If it's not listed as a defect, it didn't matter. If it was listed, negotiate it, fix it, get a cleaner version, and move forward. But the insurance companies, again, aren't seeing it that way. To them, the 4 point isn't a conversation starter. It's a risk document. Once they receive it, that's the version that gets judged. And even when we mark a system as satisfactory, that doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. Older but still functioning materials are being rejected outright. Um, for anybody listening, any real estate agents, all I have to do is say 15-year-old shingled roof, and you know what I'm talking about. It's older, it's doing its job. The carrier sees it and they're like, yeah, no. And that's a pretty much that's a conversation I've had across the board in the last, not even since the changes. It was happening before the changes, but it got worse since the hurricanes. So again, even when we mark the system as satisfactory, that doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. Older but still functioning materials are still being rejected outright. Worse, even when those systems have been updated, in some cases, if there's no documentation, no permits, no trail, underwriters are assuming the risk is still there. So let's say I'm inspecting, um, a 1950s home in St. Pete, and it's been flipped and flipped well. Maybe it's flipped well. Maybe the plumbing's been completely updated. But if I'm marking all these materials, right, and there's PVC and there's CPVC, and then there's brand new PEX in there, there's all these things, and it gets to, and there's no problems, and it gets submitted and all of that, and then the carrier looks at it and say, how does a 1950s home have all these brand new materials? It's obviously been updated. Oh, hey, the inspector noted that this is updated. Where's the permit? Permits for plumbing? Are you kidding me? But they're requiring documentation. Now think about that for a minute from the inspector's point of view. Under what circumstances is your inspector equipped to anticipate that need? And is that really part of what they're expected to do? So at the end of the day, like everything else, a lot of this gets dumped on the agents themselves, but they don't, nobody's telling the agents to expect this increased scrutiny or how to handle it. So that's kind of it's part of the landscape. It's part of the environment right now. I'll say that. Um, the truth is what used to slide now gets flagged. The form didn't just change, the way it's interpreted has really been adjusted with a lot more scrutiny. The system evolved. And if we're still using the old logic to navigate it, we're going to keep running into problems. Um, let's talk about a little bit about where deals might start to unravel, sometimes even after closing. Let's say the buyer thinks they're covered. The inspection period's over, the policy is submitted. Maybe it's even bound at this point. Everything feels like it's moving forward until the carrier sends their inspector out weeks later and cancels the policy. Or even you're this close to closing and it's rejected. And now what? What am I supposed to do with that? The agents, meanwhile, just wants a clean version of the 4 point. But often it's treated like a formality, not realizing it's getting looked at a lot more tightly. And when that form gets I don't want to say cleaned up casually, right? Because nobody's really looking to do that. But sometimes, hey, here's a picture. We replaced the electrical panel. Here's a picture. Can you please update the form? I'm like, okay, maybe I can. Maybe it looks great. But when you give me that picture as an agent without the receipt or an electrician statement, maybe the seller has a cousin or something who's qualified and he does that. Whatever it is, where's the documentation? And are you willing to accept the risk? Because 6 months from now, if there's a problem, hey, you approved this 4 point. This, and I'm going to say, well, this update was done remotely, and Jason, the real estate agent, sent me the proof. Talk to him. Nobody wants that. It's really important to understand what happens when that proof is given to us. Because now I have to mark that 4 point when I update it as having been updated, as when it was done and what was done. So as soon as it gets to the carrier, they're going to go who did the work, and was it a qualified person? All these things are happening on the back end. And if you're not prepared for it, all that's happening is days and days and days that are where nothing's getting done and you're set up for a problem that's going to push your closing back or unravel the deal completely. Does that make sense? If not, put a question in there and we'll get to it. We've got a few minutes more. Um, Unfortunately, in some cases, the inspectors themselves end up in the middle. We don't approve repairs. We don't issue coverage. We just document facts. But when the deal goes sideways, you know what? Sometimes it feels like the inspector should have known to tell you. And then there's the lender or the closer. They're left trying to patch the deal together at the last minute, often with little understanding of what triggered the rejection. Why? Because the early red flags weren't recognized for what they were. When roles blur, responsibilities shift. And that's when confusion sets in and confidence breaks down. So up to now, we've talked about what's breaking. Let's start with what works. Strategic closings don't start with the final 4 point, they start way earlier. I would greatly encourage everyone to not just not just skim, not just read the 4 point, read the home inspection report. There is often important context in the full inspection report. Maybe a stain is dry or a condition is noted as old but stable. Uh, there's going to be recommendations in the home inspection report rather than just a description of the problem, like that's all there's room for on the 4 point. If you're only reading the summary, you're missing the bigger picture. I know my agent partners. I know that's not a popular opinion. Don't shoot the messenger. I can only tell you from tens of thousands of case studies what works and what doesn't. And the agents who win are the ones who are willing to spend a half an hour getting familiar with that report and those, what can I say? Those are the ones who win. Understand the red flags that aren't defects, like we're talking about today. Cast iron, it's a checkbox item. It's gonna run you complications even when it's in good shape. Multi-jacketed cloth wiring, the industry's catching up to that. It's not necessarily a defect, but it is older and it depends on who you're working with. It's really important to have a good insurance partner who can choose from lots of different carriers and an inspector who can articulate the difference between that and cloth wiring. PECs prior to 2008, 2009. Remember, we've got to have those manufacture dates. And if it's that older skinny gray stuff, maybe it's coming out of the walls. Usually it's just connecting the fixtures to the shutoffs. It, it should be replaced. It's not necessarily a defect, but it's going to jam you up. There are more, but these are the things that that you should at least know exist. You don't have to memorize them. You don't even have to know always what they are. But when this, and I'll bring this up again, you should know to ask the question, is there anything on this form that isn't a defect but will jam up my insurance? Remember that question. That's the question. Knowing it, knowing that carriers watch out for this stuff will help you prepare your client and preserve your deal before it becomes a crisis. Step three, work with inspectors who know the game. You want somebody who doesn't just document conditions, but knows how underwriting thinks, who speaks insurance, who works with partners, who has built solutions to help you get to the closing table faster, stronger, and cleaner. Protect your clients, protect your deal, not just dump info in your lap. That we should, as an inspector, we have to know why it matters, not just say what we saw. And plan with the end in mind. Repairs shouldn't just satisfy the seller or the buyer. They need to satisfy the carrier too if there's a loan and you're going to get to close. That means having documentation ready, knowing when to push for, knowing what needs more documentation versus what can be handled with a minimum of hassle. That'll save you lots of time. Do this right and you're not reacting anymore. You're structuring your closings to succeed. You know what? We're short on time. It's just what I said before. Let me start with this. Start immediately, start right at the inspection. As soon as that inspection's done, have the conversation with your home inspector and have a conversation with your Florida best quote insurance partner before submitting the broken application because they'll be able to give you an overview. If you do that on day one of the inspection, you will win. That's the TLDR version. We used to think that if something looked good on paper, the deal would hold. But now, even when something's marked satisfactory, it's not always safe, and underwriters are looking for more than a few checkbox items. And here's the trap. If no one understands what's really going on until it's too late, there's nothing you can do to fix it. That's why the agents who win more deals today aren't just working harder. They're seeing the road before they hit the curve. They're working with the right partners. They're reading beyond the surface. They're choosing clarity early. So closing gets easier, not harder. Because the system didn't just shift, it's evolved. And whether or not the players evolved with it, well, that's the opportunity in front of us, isn't it? Thank you again for spending your morning with me. My hope is that you will leave this call with not just more information, but more control. Insurance isn't the enemy. Inspectors aren't obstacles, and deals don't fall apart because of a bad form. They fall apart when the process isn't aligned. Rock solid home inspections, we work to align it. We've built solutions. If you've got a tricky deal coming up, questions about a specific house, or just want to talk through strategy, I'm here. Let's stay connected. Let's keep raising the bar and let's make closings easier, smoother, and a whole lot more predictable. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to add something, just something that he had said earlier, and just kind of some of this is fascinating to me because I think we've gone beyond just do we have a clean 4 point? That there's a plan behind all this. So there's on the front end the importance of a pre-listing inspection and knowing what's going on the front with the house that can be corrected or potential issues that are done before you even list the home to begin with. And there's things like, that like accordion plumbing, which is not even listed on the 4 point inspection, but is a potential issue with a lot of the carriers. The fact that insurance companies and inspection companies that know those things that can give guidance. And then there's things with the house that knowing on the back end that you're going to have inspection companies send out their, I'm sorry, the insurance companies send out their own inspectors, and what they're going to be looking for could be things that are not listed on a 4 point inspection, safety hazards around the house, things that we can, having an inspection company like Rock Solid that can look for some of these things that are not just, well, it's not on the 4 point, so everything is smooth and wonderful and okay. but there are things that just need to be looked at and be aware of. You can help on the front end with a pre-listing inspection, but thinking, and I loved his point, planning with the end in mind, knowing that insurance company is going to send out their own inspection company and planning for that, and knowing that there are things that have been taken care of that might not be spouted out on a 4-point inspection, but that have been looked at and we're aware of. Because you don't want unhappy buyers at the end of all this having to make repairs and go, well, wait a minute, why is that an issue? And so having partners like us and Rock Solid, I think, are important for things like that.
I had a question in regards to the question that he wanted us to ask the inspector. He said it, and I just wanted him to repeat the question.
Sure, and I'll type it in the chat too.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Basically, it's this. Is there anything on this 4-point form, whether it's in the photos or in the materials or the ages, that might be satisfactory and still complicate insurance?
Very good. Very good.
And thank you, Vito, for coming on, man. You're the man. Vito knows his stuff, and he trains inspectors on this kind of stuff and trains realtors on this kind of stuff all the time and does classes. So appreciate him being able to come on.
It's my pleasure. Anytime I can help bring value, um, you know, it, I'm happy to do it. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the Miller team and VanDyk Mortgage, obviously. Thanks for hosting today.
Well, thank you so very much.